I remember the day I married Mark Thompson as if it were yesterday, though it feels like a lifetime ago. I was just 20, and the arranged marriage was a decision I never felt I had a choice in. My parents had always believed in tradition, and for them, this union was a perfect match. Mark was the eldest son of the Thompson family, who owned a successful textile company in Chicago. At that time, it seemed like the ideal arrangement, a blend of security and social standing. Looking back, I see how naive I was. Mark was 5 years older, a man who had always been favored by his parents. They saw him as their golden child, and I was merely the wife they had chosen for him. From the start, there was an unspoken tension between us. Mark wasn't unkind in the traditional sense. He was just indifferent, a man whose attention was rarely on me. Our home was large and comfortably furnished, a testament to the wealth Mark's family had accumulated over the years. But the grandeur of the house didn't extend to our relationship. The walls of our home seemed to echo with the emptiness of our marriage. In the early years, I tried to find my place, hoping that somehow things would change. I had dreams of my own, of working, of contributing something meaningful beyond the walls of our home. But Mark was adamant. He feared that if I worked, it would reflect poorly on us. People will think we're struggling, he'd say dismissively. So, my ambitions were shelved, and I became a housewife, bound to the expectations set for me. The real hardship began when Mark and I faced infertility. It was a topic we rarely discussed, but the strain was palpable. Mark's parents were particularly cruel. They'd call me a barren woman behind my back, a term that cut deeply. Mark, instead of defending me, seemed to retreat further into himself. His lack of support felt like another weight around my neck, tightening with each passing year. As the years went by, I felt more like a stranger in my own home. The constant reminders from Mark's family about my inability to bear children were relentless. They'd never miss an opportunity to make me feel inadequate. I tried to keep my head up, to keep my spirits alive, but it was a losing battle. Then, everything changed in an instant. Mark's father, the patriarch of the family and the owner of their $100 million textile company, died in a car accident. It was a devastating blow, but it was nothing compared to the shock that followed. During the legal proceedings, it was discovered that the company had been evading taxes for years. The revelations sent us spiraling into financial ruin. Our luxurious lifestyle was suddenly a thing of the past. We had to sell off assets, and our once grand home felt like a prison. Mark found a new job, thanks to connections my parents had, but it wasn't the same. The loss of our wealth cast a long shadow over our already strained marriage. We were no longer the well-to-do couple we had once been. The strain of financial difficulties only made our relationship worse. Then, as if things weren't bleak enough, Mark's mother had a stroke. It was a cruel twist of fate that fell upon me. Mark, who had always been more interested in avoiding responsibility, pushed the burden of caring for his ailing mother onto me. I had to juggle caring for her, managing the household, and dealing with Mark's distant and unkind demeanor. It felt like a cruel joke. My life had become a series of sacrifices with no end in sight. I remember one particular evening, a few months before my 55th birthday. Mark had always known how much I loved pottery. It was my escape, a way for me to express myself and find solace. But one day, while I was out, he decided to take it upon himself to destroy my pottery supplies. When I came home and saw the wreckage, my heart broke. It was the final straw. Years of neglect, cruelty, and now this. My passion reduced to rubble. It was at that moment that I began to seriously consider divorce. I had reached a point where I couldn't endure the misery any longer. But before I could make any plans, life threw another curveball. My parents, who had always been my source of support, passed away suddenly. Their deaths were a devastating blow, but they left me an inheritance of $1.5 million. The inheritance, however, was tangled in legal red tape. Mark, ever the opportunist, saw it as a chance to gain control. He tried to access the funds and even left me a divorce form, hoping to settle the matter quickly. But the money was not immediately accessible due to the bureaucratic process. Mark's plan was thwarted, but the situation had opened a door I had been too afraid to walk through. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come from those early days of my marriage. The house in Chicago that was once a symbol of our success had become a cage. And as the inheritance was being tied up in legalities, I found a glimmer of hope. My freedom was within reach, and I had to decide whether to grasp it or let it slip away. As I approached my 55th birthday, a sense of resignation had begun to settle in. My marriage had long been a source of pain and disillusionment, and Mark's indifference and cruelty had worn me down. The destruction of my pottery supplies was the breaking point. It was clear to me that my dreams and passions were being suffocated, and I could no longer ignore the toll it was taking on my soul. After my parents' unexpected deaths, I was left to navigate a maze of legal procedures to access the $1.5 million inheritance they had left me. The inheritance was meant to be my escape, a way to finally claim some semblance of independence and control over my own life. But Mark, ever opportunistic and driven by greed, saw it as a chance to secure his own future, even if it meant exploiting my loss. I remember vividly the day Mark confronted me about the inheritance. We were in the living room of our Chicago home, a space that had grown cold and unwelcoming over the years. Mark, with his usual air of arrogance, tried to intimidate me into surrendering control of the inheritance. "Pamela," he said with a sneer, "this money is rightfully ours. You wouldn't want to drag this out, would you?" His words felt like a slap in the face. I had always been the one to absorb his insults and disregard, but now, he was trying to take something that was rightfully mine. I could barely contain my anger. "This money is my inheritance, not yours. You have no right to it," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark's face reddened with frustration. "You're being unreasonable. We need this money to fix our situation. You know that." I shook my head. "No, Mark. This is my chance to make things right for myself. I won't let you take it from me." Despite my defiance, the inheritance was tied up in legalities that would take time to resolve. Mark's attempts to access the funds were thwarted, but his actions revealed just how far he was willing to go to exploit me. It was a wake-up call, one that forced me to confront the harsh reality of my marriage and my own desire for freedom. As the legal proceedings dragged on, I began to plan my escape. I knew I couldn't stay in the house where I had been so miserable for so long. It was a constant reminder of everything I had endured. I made the decision to move into my family home, a place that held memories of better times and provided a sense of refuge. Preparing for the move was both liberating and daunting. I had to sort through years of belongings, decide what to take and what to leave behind. The process was cathartic, allowing me to shed the weight of my past and prepare for a new chapter in my life. It was during this time that I discovered a letter from my late mother-in-law, tucked away in a drawer. The letter was a revelation. It instructed that a significant portion of her estate, including valuable jewelry, was to be passed on to me. My mother-in-law had always been distant and cold, but her final gesture was a surprising act of kindness. It felt like a small victory amidst the turmoil. I moved into my family home, a place that felt like a sanctuary compared to the prison of my previous residence. The transition wasn't easy, but it marked the beginning of a new era. I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as I settled into my new surroundings. The house was filled with the echoes of my childhood, but it was also a place where I could start to reclaim my identity. The legal issues surrounding the inheritance continued to linger, but my decision was made. I began the process of finalizing the divorce from Mark. It was a difficult and emotional process, but I was determined to see it through. The thought of finally being free from the chains of my marriage was both exhilarating and terrifying. Throughout this period, David Thompson, Mark's younger brother, reappeared in my life. David had left the family after college, and I hadn't seen him in years. His return was unexpected and brought a new dimension to the situation. David reached out to me, expressing his concern about the family's affairs and offering support. His presence was a reminder that even amidst betrayal and conflict, there were still people who cared and were willing to help. As I continued to navigate the complexities of my situation, the weight of the past slowly began to lift. The legal battles, the emotional scars, and the remnants of my old life were all part of a journey toward a new beginning. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. The possibility of freedom and happiness was within reach, and I was determined to embrace it, no matter the obstacles. My life was in upheaval as I settled into my family home, trying to adjust to the new normal. The emotional and legal turmoil from my divorce and inheritance battles were relentless, but I was determined to move forward. It was a strange feeling, living in a space that was both comforting and alien, and I struggled to find a semblance of normalcy. The turning point in this chaotic period came unexpectedly. Mark, sensing that his control over me was slipping away, became more brazen in his efforts to reclaim his hold on my life. It was one particularly cold evening when his actions revealed just how far he was willing to go to manipulate the situation. He barged into my new home, his face flushed with anger. "Pamela." Mark's voice echoed through the empty rooms. "I've had enough of this charade. You think you can just walk away with all that money and leave me with nothing?" I had been sorting through old family photos, trying to reconnect with my past. His outburst was jarring, and I felt a mix of dread and determination. "Mark, this is my home now. You have no right to come here and threaten me." Mark's eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth they once held. "You think you're so clever, don't you? But I'm not letting you get away with this. I'm going to take what's mine." His threats were not empty. I had already discovered that he had been trying to gain access to the inheritance money, using every legal loophole and deceitful tactic he could find. Despite his attempts, the money was still tied up in legal processes, and he was growing desperate. Then came the day that revealed the full extent of Mark's deceit. I had just finished dealing with a pile of paperwork related to the inheritance when I received a phone call from my lawyer. He informed me that Mark had submitted false claims to the court, attempting to forge documents to make it seem as if the inheritance was jointly owned. This was not only illegal, but a direct violation of the trust one had placed in the legal system. My heart raced as I realized the gravity of the situation. Mark was actively working to undermine my efforts and secure what he believed was rightfully his. The betrayal stung deeply, but it also solidified my resolve to fight back. I gathered all the evidence I had, determined to prove Mark's deceit and protect my hard-earned freedom. Amidst this, another surprise emerged. David Thompson, Mark's younger brother, reached out to me again. His return wasn't just a fleeting gesture of support. He genuinely wanted to help me navigate this difficult period. David's involvement was a ray of light in the growing darkness, and he offered practical assistance as well as emotional support. David's reappearance was timely, and his presence was a comforting reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. He had kept a low profile for years, but now he was actively engaged in helping me combat Mark's underhanded tactics. We worked together to counteract the false claims and to ensure that Mark's attempts to subvert the legal process would fail. As I faced these challenges, another unexpected twist occurred. I learned that my late mother-in-law had left me a significant portion of her estate, including some valuable jewelry. This revelation was both surprising and bittersweet. It was as if, in her own way, she had acknowledged my suffering and was offering me a measure of comfort and vindication. The discovery of this letter and the contents of the estate were a validation of my struggles. It was a gesture that, despite the complexities of my relationship with Mark's family, acknowledged my enduring resilience. The jewelry and other assets were not just material possessions, but symbols of the acknowledgement and respect I had long been denied. As I continued to grapple with the fallout of Mark's schemes and the emotional toll of my experiences, I began to see a glimmer of hope. The legal battles were not yet over, and the process of finalizing my divorce was still ongoing, but I felt a newfound strength. The combination of David's support, the recognition from my mother-in-law's estate, and my determination to reclaim my life fueled my resolve. It was clear that Mark's attempts to control me were failing, and his efforts to sabotage my freedom were ultimately in vain. The final stages of our legal separation were approaching, and with each passing day, I felt more confident about the future. I was on the brink of a new chapter, one where I could finally leave behind the shadows of my past and embrace the possibility of a better, more fulfilling life. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt empowered and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. My journey toward freedom was far from over, but I was determined to see it through, no matter the obstacles. The day finally arrived when my divorce from Mark was finalized. It was a bittersweet victory, a culmination of years of suffering, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter. The courtroom was behind me, and I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. It was time to reclaim my life and move forward. As I settled into my family home, the space began to feel more like a refuge than just a place to live. The transition was not seamless, but each day brought a small victory. I rearranged the furniture, hung up new curtains, and even started a small garden in the backyard. Little by little, I was transforming the house into a home, a space where I could finally be myself. One afternoon, as I was unpacking some old boxes, I stumbled upon a collection of pottery supplies. They had been untouched for years, kept away in storage while I endured Mark's disdain for my hobbies. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a spark of excitement. This was a chance to reconnect with a part of myself I had neglected for too long. I set up a small studio in the corner of the living room. The first few attempts were clumsy, but as I got back into the rhythm of shaping clay and painting, I felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. It was a small, personal victory, but it represented a larger reclaiming of my identity. I realized that I could still pursue my passions and find joy in the simple things. David Thompson continued to be a supportive presence in my life. He was a true friend through the legal battles and the emotional aftermath of my divorce. His reappearance had been unexpected, but it was clear that his intentions were genuine. We spent time talking, reminiscing, and occasionally sharing meals. His kindness was a soothing balm for the wounds of the past. One day, David visited with a smile on his face and a small envelope in his hand. Inside was a letter from my late mother-in-law, confirming that she had left a portion of her estate to me, including some valuable jewelry. It was a gesture that added a sense of closure and acknowledgement to the tumultuous years I had endured. I was grateful for this final, unexpected gift from a person whose actions had, in their way, validated my struggles and resilience. Mark had tried to reach out to me several times, but each attempt was met with my firm refusal. He was desperate to reconcile, but I was resolute. I had spent too long in the shadows of his control, and there was no turning back. I knew that my decision was right, even if it came with a tinge of sadness. With my newfound freedom, I began to explore opportunities one had once only dreamed of. I enrolled in a pottery class at a local community center and started meeting new people. The connections I made were refreshing and invigorating. I felt alive in a way I hadn't for years. As I moved forward, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The hardship, the betrayal, and the eventual triumph were all part of a larger story of resilience and self-discovery. I had faced immense challenges, but I emerged stronger and more self-assured. Looking ahead, I embraced the possibilities that lay before me. The future was filled with potential, and I was ready to seize it. The pain of the past was fading, replaced by a sense of hope and excitement for what was to come. My journey had taught me that it is never too late to reclaim one's life and find happiness, even after years of suffering. In the end, I found solace in knowing that my story was not just one of survival, but of triumph and renewal. I had faced the darkest moments and emerged into the light, ready to embrace the freedom and joy that awaited me.